Any questions?
In Pima County,
Okay.
we've been doing checks of ballots after elections. We have a certain number of selected precincts that I believe we go through.
The hand count audit?
The hand count audit.
Okay.
So a couple of precincts, a few races, and the process takes, you know, what, 100-ish, 50-ish to 100-ish volunteers, and better part of a day, or at least, you know, a little bit more than just a morning.
Okay.
And we actually like this system. It works well. It gives us more confidence in the elections than if we didn't have it. But I look at this and I go, well, wait a second. How is this really different other than the scale where you could literally check everything in a comparable amount of time?
And I think the answer is that you've hit the nail on the head, that this is not a hand count. ABE is not a hand count. The hand count audit has existed in Arizona for what now? 25, 30 years?
No.
Who would know?
We did it in 2006. It was Ted Downing who worked on the bill. And that's an interesting story about how we got this thing.
It's been 20 plus years, and it's not just Pima County, every county. There's a state statute that says within 24 hours after the close of the polls on Tuesday, they start a hand count. And yes, they have to pick a certain number of precincts, random, and they have to pick a certain number of the mail-in ballots. And it ends up being about a 2% check. Interestingly, the statute says that when you pick 2% of your mail-ins and your precincts, and you count those, that result has to be within 0.5% of the machine count from the day before. If it varies by more than 0.5%, you have to double to about essentially 4% hand count. And if that is not within 0.5%, you have to hand count the whole county. Now, in the 20 plus years we've been doing the hand count audits, no county has ever had a hand count audit that differed by more than 0.5% from the machine count the day before. But we've had elections that were decided by less than 0.5%. So there's been talk about, do we need to lower that threshold or whatever. But the hand count audit is basically a human check to see if humans doing something come up with the same thing that machines doing. ABE is more of a, we're going to take data that was already captured by the election management system, which was the machines and things, and we're just going to make it available in its entirety and with total transparency, so that if you wanted to do a third check or a complete check, or pick 10 full precincts in the county and say, okay, we're going to look at these 10 precincts, all the ballots in those 10 precincts, and we'll take another day or whatever to do that. But yeah, the little different purpose, but we're trying to accomplish the same thing, establish confidence in the minds of the citizens that everything was cool.
You got a question over here.
Sure. Not a question as much as a comment on Commissioner Stewart's question. The biggest difference between ABE and the hand count audit is people need to understand when we do the vote tabulation, we're not counting the paper ballots, we're counting the ballot images. That's how ES&S works. I can't speak for the Dominion system, but ES&S, we actually count the images, we don't count the paper ballot. So when you're doing a hand count, you are actually comparing a ballot image count to a human hand count of the paper ballot. It is a significant check on the way the system works.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I found, serving on the Vote Count Verification Commission for a couple of years, is statutorily, every county in the state is required to do a hand count audit.
Yes.
I think the most, at that time, the most I'd ever seen was 9 counties that participated. And the reason the counties that didn't participate is they couldn't get party participation.
Yeah, the parties didn't agree to send enough people to man the tables, and so they could. So,
You know, the first one
the
ever
hand count
county,
is,
if I could just jump in, the Republicans boycotted it, and we had to have 2 parties. So we were tight with the Libertarian Party, so they came in, and then they appointed Democrats, and the next day the Republicans showed up. And that's how it worked out, and we were doing it all along. Back in those days, 50% of the vote was actual precincts you could actually count. When we had to count the vote by mail, these were only, at that time, all we could see is batches. Okay? And what did that batch really mean? And for me, when we used to do those audits, when I was involved in it, I used to always compare the numbers, because back in those days, generally the rule of large numbers were working somewhat, and we'd be very, very close at the precinct vote, and the vote by mail would be very close, even though you're counting batches. We could see there was not much change. And then in 2000, that all changed because Trump said, hey, don't vote by mail, you can't trust it, go vote at a precinct. And it caused a lot of friction, and all of a sudden, there was just a huge shift. And the shift wasn't fraud, the shift was because people were changing their pattern of voting. And really that audit today is not as good as what we had a long time ago when Ted wrote the bill. And interesting enough, when he wrote the bill, there's another part of the story, that the counties got together, Pima County and Maricopa. And Brad Nelson and also Karen Osborne, which was part of the association, said, you know, we really don't want to do these audits, but we'll go along with it and we'll give you what you want, but you will not check a county race. If you check a county race, we'll kill it. And that's how it went down. Ted?
Yeah, and I should say that Karen Johnson, who's friendly or something, Karen, I was the ones that negotiated it, and John's right. The counties didn't want it. There's a second thing they didn't want. The most important elections concern money.
Yeah.
And one thing that all the bond issues, which if you look at how much is passed in bond issues versus state budget, actually the bond issues is, I shouldn't say elephant in the room because I don't give credit to the party, but it's certainly big. And that was the issue. But I just want to make one quick point about the difference, and back to your question about the difference between comparing ABE to the hand count.
yeah, over here, yeah.
Let's get exactly the key word here. The hand count audit system began because of the election of Watuki. Remember where McComish won an election when we did one of those recounts, it flipped.
Yeah.
And Tone, I think was his name, was conservative, hyper-conservative Republican lost, and a more moderate, should wait, somebody looks like you, in terms of, but a more moderate political position took over. Karen and I, when we tried to put this thing through on hand count, the intention is the same as ABE. It's to instill each little step we take in election integrity adds a little bit more to the trustometer meeting. You want to increase the trust that people have. So, and you can never create complete trust, and I've watched you struggle with many people in your face about this. You never increase it. But if we can just, each thing we do, as a commission, as an individual, as a designer, is slightly increase the trust. That is the counter to the autocracy and the fear people have. Show them a good system. That's what you two are doing. Both systems are perfect. Not perfect. Both systems bring the trustometer level just a little bit higher.
Have you done any work with the 2024 audit in Arizona where we had, for the first time, I believe, a 2-card ballot? And did that create any problems with ABE?
Not here, but I've done 2 or 3 card ballots out of Maryland. And you know, let's talk about that, is that ABE can only do, listen, this is Microsoft Excel. The limit is 1,045,000 rows, okay? That's the limit, okay? Now, if you had a 2 ballot system and you went over that, then we would run ballots separately and create 2 sets. One is ballot 1 and one is ballot 2, and that way you would have 2 CVRs, one for each ballot. And if it was precincts, we could put them all together and do that. That would be not a problem. okay? And
I think
we are gonna
eventually,
build a Microsoft Access one eventually.
Eventually we want to move this into Access where there's almost no limit. Because right now, the limitations of Excel itself would not allow this to be used, for example, for Maricopa County. The other 14 counties in Arizona, we could do it right now.
If A was to be used on Maricopa County, I'd break it into 5. Because they have
Supervisor
5
districts?
supervisors districts. And I'd run it that way. And then create. And then combine through Access to build the precincts parts or whatever. It's an amazing program. You can see how real simple it really is. And like I said, all we did was to develop a macro to know what buttons to push to save you a lot of time. And we had 45 versions. That's how many versions.
And
Unfortunately,
we've already talked to a gentleman last night
About
who
another, yeah.
suggested that put this into a web-based thing, and it would be even more simple than John's version of A goes to A and click to fill in this, you know. There's other ways to just
Yeah.
make this even.
the simplest way
We're just
is
trying to
we
get-
want to train you guys how to do it. And then you take your images, once we get them freed, we put them in the cloud. And all you mail out is a precinct CVR. Because we want to train precinct committee women and men how to check their own precinct. And when they go knocking on that door and say, "Hi, Mr. Bennett, she was seeing you haven't voted." "Well, I don't vote. I gave up on that." You know, because like, put it this way, in this last election, 90 million people didn't vote, okay? And the previous election was 80 million, okay? A lot of people don't vote because they believe what Mark Twain said. You know what Mark Twain said? If voting made a difference, they wouldn't let us do it.
Okay.
There's a lot of that going on out there. I believe.
I want to go back to any, let's go
Sorry.
back to any
I could go on.
questions. It's not our intent to keep you
That's right.
here all day or whatever. Any questions from commissioners? We've got some hands in the audience. Do you mind, Brian, if we take some questions from the audience, or would you rather keep it at the commission level?
Let's keep it at the commission level so we
Okay.
don't get in trouble with the county attorney.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe next time we'll have the public part after, so that maybe we spurred some interest.
All
Okay,
right, I've got-
Commissioner Stewart.
I've got one question, which is, it's a very interesting tool. I'm kind of excited by it, but what would be next?
What would be next is meeting with the county election director and figuring out how to, I mean, there's nothing much to just make it available, but train Pima County officials on how to use it, how to make it better. We're not selling it. We're a nonprofit organization. We're not here trying to sell anything. And as I said earlier, there's other systems. Terrence County in Texas, and what's the big county in Idaho that includes Boise? There's some counties around the country that are already putting ballot images and the cast vote record on their website or in the cloud or whatever. And
We've helped a couple of people already develop systems on their own. And that was very important because I don't want to be a goddamn vendor. Okay, I did this because I care about my country, my democracy, my children's future and what's coming out, and how badly our country is drastically changing. And I believe in the 24 election, we didn't have any violence because Trump won, and everybody, you know. And in the Democrats, you know, I always believe if you, you know, being that he's a Republican and I'm a Democrat, when I went into the Maricopa audit, I became hated. I couldn't believe my own party was threatening me, telling me I shouldn't have done it. And here is the biggest recount that ever happened, I know, of in the last 20 years in the United States. And I am the executive director, and he called me up. And by the way, I wasn't his first phone call, okay? And he called some other guys and he says, "No way I'm crossing that picket line." Well, it wasn't a picket line because I did not go into what I call the fraudit because as a Democrat, I went in there because who I am and what I do and what I can learn. Nothing is fixed in my life until I know why it broke. I want to know why, and that's how my mind works. And so digging in all of this is how we got together.
So I think the next steps, Commissioner Stewart, would be, you know, maybe having some meetings, follow-up meetings with you as the commission, and then between those and maybe something with the department, election department, you would make a recommendation to the board to consider this tool or one of 3 or 4 others that are bouncing around the country.
And what you would need is
Yeah.
to buy a separate computer.
Yeah.
You never connect to the EMS. You only export. You treat that computer like it was a public record. It never goes that way. You just bring the data in. You could start writing ABE a day after the election. That's why that combined feature is there. That way you could, but we want you to be complete.
Yeah, you could
done by
check.
certification, and you know that if there was a race within 1 vote, you would see everything. And you could determine that. And if you were in Maryland, and
They're
you
not in
call up a
Maryland.
person and say, hey, you two are in a close race. Can you please come in? You have 2 choices. You can have a machine recount, okay, in this board of supervisors, or let's say in this school race where there's only 8,000 people, okay? But you know, to recount your race, we're gonna have to recount 450,000 ballots. How
Take
about if we
this,
just
you look
give you
at
the thumb
8,000
drives and
ballots.
teach you how to use it, and you go back and tell us what you want to do? You have that choice.
Commissioner Cinnamon?
What additional activities would be required of our election department to utilize this?
I would ask Constance here.
First and foremost, it would require a law change. Ballot images are not public records. And by digital, because this cast book record is a digital record, it is not a public record.
That's it.
Well, but if
Wait a
you were
minute.
using the tool within the county.
Wait a minute. Ballot
Hey,
image.
hey, no, no,
Well, no.
one person at a time.
There is, I just have to say respectfully, there's a difference of opinion as to whether the ballot images are, let me say it this way, can be released by authorization of the board. Is it 16-625? 16
ARS 16625.
Yeah, ARS 16625 clearly indicates that the Board of Supervisors can authorize, it usually involves a judge agreeing, to make the ballot papers themselves public. That is rarely done. I don't think it's ever been done. The Senate in 2021, when they did the audit of Maricopa County, they basically used the subpoena power of the Arizona State Senate to have Maricopa County deliver the ballots to the audit. But you're right, they never became public record, the ballots. But there's clear indication in 16625 that the Board of Supervisors can release the ballot images if they want to. If they don't, if they want to just say, no, we want to use a tool, we want to let our election people in Pima County use this tool to verify back to this commission or to themselves or to the board that, yeah, we use this tool to triple check. A little different than the hand count audit that Commissioner Stewart was talking about, but I think the board does have the authority to say, we can use this tool internally in the county to do more checks.
Yeah. And if Bill wants to elaborate, because we want to explain why they're not available at this moment. And it's because of Santa Cruz County. Bill, can you take the mic and explain?
Yeah,
I
well,
want to make sure I get it recorded.
The thing I want to be clear about is they are public records. There's no question about that. We litigated in Maricopa County that they never, it's certain that they're public records.
Yeah.
The question is whether the public has a right to get them.
So what's the
But
difference?
The legislature can say some things are public records, but you can't get them.
Okay.
But there's no question they're public records.
Okay.
So there's no question that internally you can't look at them and use them, but at the moment, the law is such that I couldn't come in and say, give them to me. But there's no question they're public records. I want to be sure about
And we got
that.
font-
And there's no question you've got the rights to access and do what you want.
Chair Pickles. I do agree they are public records, but they are exempt from to be released as a public record.
Okay.
Right.
Under FOIA.
Right.
What we're really recommending is the consideration of a tool like ABE to do internal work within the county. It's another step and perhaps a law change to say clearly for every county in the whole state that once a county has used a tool like this, and then we're going to release the ballot images to. But the ballot images we were showing you from Wisconsin and Maryland, those are election jurisdictions in other states that have decided to make them publicly available.
And we did that. We convinced Wisconsin and Dade County, other counties, Georgia.
Tarrant County,
convinced them to-
Texas does it.
The whole state. Wisconsin was an easy one. We were up there for the recount. Georgia, I met with a couple of legislators in a conference that we had in California. They went back and got it passed. And now they're completely releasing. And there are more states starting to line up to do this, to hopefully prove to people that you're doing a great job. And that's what we want to show. We want people, the first person who ever did this was out of California, out of Humboldt County. And that election director used to walk around town, and then what they did is they bought a digital scanner, which we tried to get Pima County to do in 2006 or 7, to do the same thing, and run all the ballots through a digital scanner, and then use the images. When Humboldt County did that, they found out the default system had a fault. And it's been used all over the country. The first batch of ballots that ran, it killed them, it dropped them. That's what we discovered when they did that. And so it is the future. It really is. We have to, if we're going to have a democracy that we all can believe in and be proud of it.
Yes, Commissioner.
Commissioner Strela, question, as I understand the tool, it's to augment the capabilities of the elections department, the equivalent, to verify and to some extent validate their results. That adds a little bit of verification validation. If it were to go to the next step where the tool and the data was released to the public, are there any jurisdictions that have done that? And what is the advantage of it, the disadvantage? And how has it fixed or improved transparency or hurt the public release of this, I'll say, phenomenal amount of data to a bunch of novices that may misuse the information to generate controversy?
You know, that's a good point, but I'd say this. You have the original ballot. You have the original image. The image is hashed. And if somebody wants to take this stuff and manipulate it, as Bill said in a court case one time, have you ever heard of being tarred and feathered? We got the original ballot. We got the original image. And I believe in crowdsourcing the truth. Oh, you found something. And plus, we don't want to release to the public 450,000 images. Big precincts. That's our building block. It's like that story that he told me, that after the election at 7 o'clock, people would come in and they would watch the ballots being counted, then they'd punch a hole in the ballot, put it in a string, and I could walk up and look at it. Yeah, that's right.
I think it would take maybe making some more subjective statements as to whether I think it's helped in these other jurisdictions that are doing it already. But I know that Tarrant County, almost all of Idaho.
It was in the New York Times a couple months ago.
I would say let's do some work and find out whether Idaho publishing all the ballot images has helped Idahoans feel more comfortable or not, or Tarrant County, Texas, or Idaho's one of those states where the results of the big profile races aren't usually very close, but
I'm just exploring, not quite go to the public, but go to the political parties with that. Is there jurisdictions that do that, provide this information?
In between the county only using it internally and then telling everybody else, yeah, we did this and trust us more. Yes, you could have some an interim step would be in a very controlled environment. You allow parties or candidates or somebody with non-disclosure and agreements or whatever to come in and see the same thing. Or as John mentioned, there's a close race between two people and somebody wants to recount in the worst way and say, okay, you're gonna come in, we're gonna show you the 8,000 ballots in your race, and we're not gonna make the county count 500,000 ballots again to prove to somebody that the result in this one 8,000 school board race was legitimate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stewart?
Or just this board.
Or just this board.
You know, one of the things I see with this is you've made the point a number of times today, this is the only county that has a commission like this to do this kind of thing. Certainly in the state of Arizona, I didn't realize it was nationwide, but we'll take you at your word. But getting to the point where you're answering questions of the public that emphasize the legitimacy or the illegitimacy of the election results, the more you can do that, and you're never going to convince everybody that the information you're putting out there is right. It's you know, I've seen too many people sit there and say, well, you know, what if we showed you all of the ballots and your candidate really did lose? And the answer is, I just don't believe it. You know, you're never going to make 100% of the people happy 100% of the time. But I think looking at it from a tool perspective, be it at the county elections level or at this commission's level, it just enhances what it is that we're trying to establish as far as our relationship with the voting public and their confidence in the process that we do to elect officials that represent us at all levels of government.
Right.
So, yeah, I think there's some opportunities there. We're not going to come to any conclusions today.
No, and we're not asking for that.
But it's certainly something that we can explore going forward.
As I was driving, thank you, Commissioner, as I was driving down from Prescott yesterday to be here this morning, I was on the phone with the Yavapai County Election Director. Her and the recorder in Yavapai, they want to release their ballot images so bad, and they're probably going through the same discussions with their legal folks about can we or can the board authorize that? They think they do a really good job in Yavapai, and I agree. And they want to release ballot images to the public, but a step would be do something like a commission here and use an extra tool to just, you know, verify.
Maricopa wants to do the same thing. They came in and testified in the bill, if you remember. And they sent a guy supporting our bill that was vetoed by the governor. It was killed by common cause. And then we tried 2 more times to get it passed. And then at that point,
I had a bill 2 years ago in the Senate. I was in the Senate from 99 to 2007, but then 2 years ago, so 23 and 24, I was in the Senate. And I got this bill, bipartisan support through the Senate and the House, and Hobbs vetoed it. Governor Hobbs vetoed it. Secretary Fontes supported a law change that would clarify that if, or under very controlled circumstances, the Board of Supervisors can release it to the public or just use it as an internal tool. But we're on the cusp of, it's being done in other parts of the country, and I think it's a positive step forward as long as we think it through, and maybe we do an interim step of using the tool back at the commission level before we figure out how do we take it to the public.
if you want to see what Fontes and what happened in that hearing, you know, I'm good at videotaping a lot of things for historic records. And you'll find the testimony of Ken Bennett, and of course, also Bill Reisner, and then Adrian Fontes, 100% behind this, okay? And we did meet with Fontes about ABE. He has seen ABE, okay? We didn't ask him to endorse, because it is, you know, he's got a big plate. But he did tell us this: the Board of Supervisors can work with the images, they can work with ABE, Okay, that's what he's saying. But the digital, go at it. Put the best system you can together to verify to the people. And like you said, right here you'll find the link. Hear what he had to say, because it was tremendous testimony. And he tells a story about he was at an event and he met a guy from the UN and they were talking about elections. And he says, you know, there's one country in this world that has the highest approval rate of their voting system in the world. Mongolia. They publish all their images online by precinct. Is what they do. And we do have a minor problem with the possibility of outing a voter. It's 0.2%.
Well,
is what
yeah,
it is.
let's not-
But yeah.
Back where we had, right here. If you've got two people voting on a ballot style and they both vote for Harris, we know how those two people voted. But that already exists because you release already a statement of votes cast.
It's there.
By precinct. And so the statement of votes cast would disclose that already. Not that we want to accentuate that, but the bill that I got through in a bipartisan vote through the House and the Senate said that any precincts under 25 would be combined into kind of a generic holding place so that there's no ballot style that could possibly out any two voters or three or one or whatever.
And we get into that quite intensively when it comes to re-precincting to make sure that we have a minimum number of voters.
Yeah, the fewer situations like this, the better.
And this will help you find them real quick and see these anomalies and see how you can figure it out. The other thing we're totally against is redactions. I want you to know that it's legal in this state to take a picture of your ballot, put it right there, and put it on the internet. If you write your name on your ballot, you outed yourself. Now, you shouldn't have done it, but you outed yourself, so don't tell us, oh my God, you've exposed my ballot. Well, don't sign it, okay? That's a simple fix. We want these images treated like evidence.
Okay.
It's evidence.
Let's go back to any questions.
Thank you all for being here today. We appreciate the presentation.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Democracy in peril, a well-orchestrated decline? The true threat to democracy is money, power, and algorithms. The growing influence of billionaire entrepreneurs, exemplified by Elon Musk, poses an increasing threat to the stability of our democratic republic. By John Brakey, October 23, 2024. Excerpt: Many people attribute the root of our current political crisis to polarization and tribalism, driven in part by social media algorithms. This mirror effect intensifies the divide. Republicans view Democrats as an existential threat, and vice versa. However, polarization may be a symptom rather than the cause. The real cause could be a well-funded, strategic takeover of key institutions, the GOP, the Supreme Court, state legislatures, redistricting processes, and Congress, with the ultimate goal of establishing rule by the wealthy. This theory, supported by Occam's razor, suggests that the decline of democracy is not accidental, but intentionally engineered by powerful elites. Occam's razor is a principle that favors the simplest explanation, with the fewest assumptions, when presented with competing hypotheses. In this case, instead of attributing the erosion of democratic systems to a complex web of unrelated factors like polarization, tribalism, or chance, the simplest explanation is that it is a coordinated effort by those with wealth and influence to concentrate power. Whether through dark money or carefully crafted political strategies, these forces are systematically dismantling democratic structures to serve their interests. Without democracy, progress on critical issues like climate change, public health, racial justice, and economic inequality will be nearly impossible, especially in an autocracy. With over 2 decades of experience in election transparency and integrity, I, John Brakey, have witnessed firsthand that while the scale of each presidential election has grown since 2000, the quality has not. This gradual decline in public records threatens the core of our democratic process. And with that passage of time, institutional memory fades. We believe it's important to provide some historical context about what we uncovered between 2004 and 2012. To that end, we'd like to share a short clip from Fatally Flawed, a documentary about the RTA election and the 8 years we spent in litigation. Our goal is not to dwell on the past, but to ensure that the lessons learned are not forgotten. Understanding history allows us to move forward with greater transparency and trust. We are encouraged by the direction of Pima County elections today and the leadership of our new election director and board. This next effort will be a significant step toward restoring complete confidence in the electoral process. After all, seeing is believing, especially in light of Ken Bennett's 5 key transparency principles. With respect and appreciation, John R. Brakey.
Data as part, and the court agreed that the Democratic Party has a statutory right and a critical role in our system to track and to see what's going on with elections.
This is not about just Pima County, it's about our country.
The defense in this case was an outrage. The defense in this case was mayhem and chaos. He says there's people out there that have an interest in discrediting the system, that have an interest in discrediting the administration, an interest in discrediting the electoral system, discrediting potential vendors. He says, quote, if they get the MDB file, they will have all the parts they need to discredit our system.
Maybe I can clarify a few issues here. It's an undisputed fact at this point that there is no safety or security difference possible between releasing the final database from a given election series and releasing all of the files for a given election series.
What this eliminates is any possibility that the county's computer could be rigged to alter or damage the files or destroy them outright as they come off of one of the hard disks. So it's a no cheating.